Ladies and gentlemen, Decrypted Matrix on Revealing Talk Radio. Thank you for tuning in tonight, December 11th, 2012. It's a very special episode we have for you tonight. We have a very special guest. We are continuing a topic in more detail tonight that was explored somewhat last night. The idea of a corporation masquerading as a legitimate government. Certainly not the first time that we've seen this. This idea is popping up more and more nowadays. The privatization of what should be a government entity. Look a little closer, doesn't pass the smell test. We figure out, wow, these laws have been rewritten. There's a difference between legal and lawful. We have things like maritime law, admiralty law, martial law, all these different laws floating about. No one can really understand them. We have agents of these false governments, false government entities, strapped, packing the heat. IRS agents, we find out, carry guns on their hips. This is just crazy stuff, and I cannot wait to share a little bit of it tonight. Tonight we have the founder of a documentary and researcher, journalist, Mr. Scott Bartle we have tonight. Has started this frequently unanswered questions of the Australian government. You can check out the trailer. It's up on decryptedmatrix.com right now. You can see the full documentary. It's a 52-minute documentary that talks about how Scott started to uncover and pull at this thread of information that seemed to reveal itself or not reveal itself, depending on how you look at it, with his Corvette. All he wanted to do was bring his Corvette from Chicago to Australia. And man, is this an interesting story. I'm so thrilled to have him on today. Scott, how are you, buddy?
Max, hello. How's it going? Yeah, good, thanks.
Awesome. This is just such a interesting story, and I can't wait to hear, what has transpired and what's developed for you since then. I think everyone is certainly asking, I can tell from the comments alone, do you have the car back yet?
Unfortunately, no. And in the same sentence, I'll say I'm happy for the so-called customs to hang on to it in exchange for the payment of the invoices that I've been putting to them.
Right.
The disappointing thing is they're not paying their invoices.
Oh, but man, I bet are they adding up by now?
I just sent them another one today.
How polite of you to extend such a grace period. Where else have we seen this from a corporation itself? I think probably never.
Well, I think there's a certain level of, let's say, unawareness of the actual extent of what's going on in our so-called government at the moment. That unfortunately, a lot of people, even those who work there, are not aware of what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this will be great, for the listeners that have tuned in for the first time tonight, and for even some of my longtime listeners might not be up to speed on the frequently unanswered questions. So let's start at the top, Scott. How did you maybe originally get started in your journalistic, research-based skills, before this Corvette incident? Where did it really begin for you?
Well, it pretty much was the Corvette. It's a 1959 Chev Corvette. And first, I believed that I needed to get an import approval with the Department of Transport here in Australia to even import it. And going through that process ultimately took about 9 months. And in doing so, I discovered all sorts of rule changes, moving of the goalposts, all sorts of shifty behaviour that just was not adding up for what we would think of as government. We think of them as public servants and answerable to us, respectful, provide honest answers, etc. And I wasn't seeing much of that at all. And that was probably the starter into starting to dig a little bit deeper and go and research some of this information that was available on what's happening out there with our so-called government at the moment.
Very interesting. Thank you for that. I did have a chance to see the full documentary. Very enlightening. You mentioned so many important topics here that we'll get into tonight, and it looks like I've only really scratched the surface as far as the information also that you've made available throughout this journey. Because I'm on and as well. Scott's website, truth-now.net / I'm on the sitemap. So anybody who wants to go to truth-now.net can follow along, watch the trailer here while we're talking, and then look at this sitemap of the information and kind of how he breaks this down. How did how did you figure out how to really get a handle on this and then make something positive of it?
Well, I suppose the information appeared to be out there in the public. I didn't necessarily discover anything new. All of the research that I did came from books and other websites and that sort of thing. It's perhaps the way I assembled it and used it, which is probably the difference. And what I was finding was that when people went along to the likes of government and said, you're this and you're doing that and you're just a corporation, those folk who worked in government, the shutters were just coming down. You could almost see their eyes rolling back in their head and glazing over and thinking about when the pub was opening and what time the footy started. So what was happening was that when you tried to tell the government what was happening, they'd just shut down. And so what that told me was that by telling, you're not performing an effective communication. You're not getting the message across that you're trying to share with them. And so I think I was sitting on the bus one day and just drew out this little diagram. I thought, well, why don't we ask for the evidence from these public servants that they are in fact public servants and they are part of the real government, and that not have them give us some evidence that they actually are performing the role that they are. And that's essentially what formed the basis of the process that I'm working with. It's just asking questions to find out the legitimacy of those claiming government status. And that essentially evolved into the title of this documentary, which Unanswered Questions. Because when we started asking these questions, we just got absolutely zero response. And that was what became quite telling out of that exercise. So we're pushing now probably 14 or 15 months with customs without any evidence that they are in fact a legitimate government department.
Excellent.
So,
Excellent. So these questions, that's what the questions are, right? Is you want to know, okay, these governments are saying, these quote unquote governments are billing me money now to bring this car over, giving me X, Y, and Z reason. And now you are also addressing the legitimacy of their question, not invalidating what they're requesting, but actually saying, okay, I understand you now. You want this from me, but you need to prove your authenticity before I'm going to pay up. And you made a great point. Like, if the pizza guy tries to charge you too much for your pizza, you're going to call him out on it. So it's like, why are people not calling out the government here when they in many cases they'll refuse to even stand up and admit who they work for or who they really answer to?
Yeah, and you even turn to the likes of the movies for a standard example, and you get the scenario if someone turns up with a warrant to search a property. And the first question usually comes out of the person's mouth is, have you got a warrant? Now, if you didn't have one, the typical response is, no, sorry, fellas, you're not coming in. Go get yourself a warrant. So essentially what I'm saying is when so-called government turns up to demand something from you, it is, well, show me your authority. Show me your warrant in many regards. So that's the question that's being asked.
Yeah, yeah. The instant thought that I had, when you said you question them on this stuff, and of course they start thinking about the pub, and their eyes glaze over, and that they'd want to be anywhere but there and have to answer your question. And it's almost like you're making them realize Santa isn't real. You're you're
Yeah.
making them realize the government that they're representing at their measly, $10 an hour job, or if they're lucky, $20 an hour, and getting, and realizing, whoa, wait a minute, you're taking my security blanket away. uh, I'm not working for an authentic government agency. I mean, I could see that being questioned in
Mm.
their mind also.
Yeah, if you tell them that that's the scenario that's happening, most won't want to hear that. And that's when you get that glazed look. And yet, when you ask them the question for the legitimacy or the evidence that they are legitimate, they almost have to go to a place in their own mind to go, well, are we really government? I need to get this evidence to show this guy, show him my authority, show him the certificate of commission, show him that this is real. Um, and when they can't, or if they can't, then that triggers a little process within their own mind. They go, oh, maybe we aren't actually real government. And that's where the learning is taking place. And that's what I thought was of more benefit than going in there saying, you're this and you're that, and you're just a corporation. And that wasn't providing any benefit to anyone. You just get labeled as a nutcase. And yet when you go in there seeking information, you're going in there with good intent. You're not being malicious. You're just saying, look, I'm happy to pay this charge, but before I do, I'd like to know that I'm paying real government. I don't want to be paying some entity that's pretending to be government, and my money's not actually going to help the community. And I think most people would agree that they would want to have their taxes go to the benefit of the community.
Yeah, good point. Exactly, a good point. You made a good point about, who's cheating who in that concept. But let's get back to the first basics, just for in case any listeners might be lost here. Scott was trying to get a Corvette from America, made in Chicago, shipped over to Australia. What was the first thing that they, blocked you with that made you question, okay, wait a minute, I'm not paying this. I'm going to figure out if this is even legit. What was that first thing?
The first one that really pushed me over the edge was when the Corvette had already landed in Australia. Up until then, I'd been happy to pay the goods and services tax and the luxury car tax. The thing that pushed me over the edge was when the Department of Environment came along and said, you have to apply for a pre-charged equipment license, essentially to do with the gas within the air conditioner. And that just did not sit well with me at all. And I said, no, this is crazy. I should have known first about this license before I even put the car on a boat to get it to Australia. But to find out once it was already in the hands of customs and that was basically like extortion. To be told that sort of thing by the time you'd already got it to the country and it's in this secure area where your choices are either pay for a mechanic to get the gas out or pay for this license. That's just being bent over a barrel, and I did not like that at all.
Well, good for you. Good for you. That is awesome that you didn't just take it, and bend over like most people do. They just expect you, and they're so used to it now that, oh, people, this is just, they assume that we're legitimate and this is how we operate. And, it all really links back. I saw so many similarities to how the United States was created. An article up on Decrypted Matrix right now. It's the United States Code. It's the origins, talks about the origins of the United States, how it was an idea, a business idea out of the British Crown, and they named it the Virginia Company. The Virginia Company came over and established the 13 colonies, and essentially the United States is nothing more than the United States of America, Inc. And President Barack Obama is the president and CEO of United States of America Incorporated. So to hear and watch your documentary, just couldn't wait for the next, the next thing that you had uncovered here, because so many people just haven't gone to the lengths that you did to really say, wait a minute, and ask those tough questions.
Thank you. Well, I think the point that I drew from is it may well be, or for example, a lot of people say it's okay to have government as a company. And yet my question in response to that is, who writes the rules for companies? Do government set the rules for that? Or do companies set the rules for government? Which way is it? Who writes the rules for who?
That's
The
great.
rule makers, and they set the rules for companies, meaning companies would be subservient to government, and the two are not interchangeable, that they are two completely different things. Government, to me, is essentially acts as a trustee for the likes of real government to return benefits to you in the likes of roads and police services and health services and that sort of thing. So you act as like an executor, appoint the government as a trustee to return benefits to you as the beneficiary. So you've got this trust arrangement. And that to me is real government. Now, when you get a change to that scenario and you get, for example, a gun held to your head to act as if you are the trustee, follow the rules of a government that's positioned itself in a trustee in the executor's role, and you have to return benefits to them, then your whole trust scenario has been completely inverted or usurped. So it goes back to the identification of who we're really dealing with. To me, I didn't want to put or assign as trustee a company that was pretending to be government.
Yep. And that's where it comes in with the cheating concept. They're wanting you to, not cheat the Australian people, so you need to pay this tax. Well, whoa. Okay, if you want to really get down to brass tacks, I would be cheating the Australian people to pay this tax because it's connected to the Commonwealth of Australia, which is licensed with the Securities and Exchange Commission in America, in the USA. So hold that thought, Scott. Thank you so much for being here today. We're going to cut to a quick break, and we will be right back with Scott Bartle, Frequently Unanswered Questions. And we are back tonight. Awesome episode we have. RevealingTalkRadio.com, Decrypted Matrix. Tonight we're on with Scott Bartle, creator of the documentary Frequently Unanswered Questions. The government of Australia, it seems to be masquerading as two entities. Which entity is it? A legitimate one versus the illegitimate one. The Parliament versus the Commonwealth of Australia. Thank you, Scott, for being here tonight. I had to ask, through this process, going through the tax and the new license and for the gas and the air conditioner, just ridiculous things, you started to notice some change-ups. I think you started to notice some corporate logos and like copyright and the seals changed. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, I suppose the biggest ones were inconsistencies with terms that were in the Constitution and what we're actually seeing out in real life today in 2012. And a perfect example of that is within the Constitution of 1900, we've got the definition of Parliament as it's either called the Parliament or the Parliament of the Commonwealth. And even the Commonwealth is specifically defined as to what that means. And yet what we've got on the building over in Canberra, the capital of Australia, is this building called the Parliament of Australia. Now, there's a distinct lack of the word Commonwealth in that name. So we've got a Parliament that's lacking the Commonwealth and doesn't resemble the name given to Parliament within the Constitution. Now, that presents to me two possibilities. Is either your Constitution is that weak that doesn't really matter and it's no worries, we'll just put whatever we like up here and it'll be fine. Everyone will know that it's the same parliament, and don't worry about it, she'll be right, mate. Or alternatively, the Constitution is rock solid and it means what it says, and that the Parliament is to be called the Parliament of the Commonwealth. And we've got another one called the Parliament of Australia, which supports this idea of the possibility of two entities, one being a legitimate de jure government and one being a corporate entity. And then you've got the same thing happening with the actual name of government itself. In the Constitution, it says the government of the Commonwealth. And yet, in the mail we receive in the letterbox, you get this correspondence from a mob called the Australian Government. Now, they're completely different names. And again, one is completely lacking of the term Commonwealth.
Unreal.
So again, what have we got? Which is it? And when you put these questions to the likes of those claiming the government status, you get absolute silence. And that's the worrying aspect. So what I did was I started to build from that, and I attached a meaning to the silence after a certain reasonable period of time, and took it that and formalised the fact that if you can't give me any evidence, Mr. Customs, that you are in fact a real government department, then all things point to you being a pretender or an imposter, and I'm going to treat you like a corporate entity and offer you some terms and conditions, because that's how you deal with companies and corporations. And that is what kicked me off the path of starting to invoice customs for seizing my Corvette, seemingly without any basis. If they're not real government, they don't have any force, any more power than the ice cream kid. So to this day, every invoice that I've issued them, I've given them a chance to prove that they are real government, and I'd waive the invoice. And they haven't taken me up on any one of those.
Imagine not. Imagine not. There is a similarity I keep thinking here, and here in America, it's called the Federal Reserve System, which is a complete misnomer for a couple reasons. One, it's not federal any more than Federal Express is federal, so that's the first problem. And then it's not a reserve, because everybody who pays attention, especially in the alternative crowd, knows that the Federal Reserve is a hollowed-out system. It's a conglomerate of 13 or so private banking institutions that have no authority really over anyone, yet everyone else, corporations and government, seem to be completely subservient to them, this private unofficial organization that calls itself the Federal Reserve Bank. And so the fact that you would come across these very similar things now, even down to the language that they use is even being specifically manipulated. What were some of the codes and seals maybe that you noticed changed? So there was not just the language they were using changed, but also the who they were referencing, and the logos that came along seemed to change as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the main seal that we're looking at is the Great Seal of the United Kingdom, which I believe sits atop the original Constitution, being the lion and the unicorn. Now, there's various different varieties of that seal. However, a lion and a unicorn is distinctly different from what is currently touted being a kangaroo and an emu.
Right, totally different animals, yet they're still just a fancy seal. Oh, nobody will notice.
And it's not even remotely close. You're not saying, oh, well, this one's missing the shield, or the crown dips one way versus the other way, or... No, they're completely different. And whilst some will say, oh, well, yeah, Australia was granted this coat of arms back in 1908, and then the latest version in 1912 by royal warrant, and I go, well, see, look, it's legitimate. They granted this seal. I'm going, well, that's fantastic. And yet in 1925, we've got, again, the Office of Governor in Queensland, one of the states of Australia. From the UK, they revoked a document which is called the Letters Patent, which constituted the Office of Governor into the state of Queensland. And I'm not sure regarding the similarities of governors with the US, but in Australia, that's pretty much the linchpin of government. It's the Queen's representative for the state, and then we have the Governor-General being the Queen's representative for the Commonwealth. So these are key positions, which without those governors, you don't have judges, you don't have magistrates, you don't have officers, ministers, or royal assent to any of the acts that have been brought in. And basically, as a result of that, we've got in 1925 an example of the Great Seal of the United Kingdom being used to revoke the letters patent of 1900, the first constituting of the office of Governor for Queensland, and setting up a new office of Governor for the state of Queensland as they increased the geographical boundaries of Queensland. So they did a modification. So we've got an example in 1925 of the use of this Great Seal of the United Kingdom. That tells to me that that's the seal that the United Kingdom uses to set up this office of Governor-General. It would also be the seal that the governors use as the Queen's representative. It would appear very unlikely that the Queen's representative would use the Great Seal of Australia, being this kangaroo and the emu, as their seal. And then worse, we start seeing that this kangaroo and the emu is registered with a United States Patent and Trademark Office as a trademark. And there's 6 different varieties of it registered and copyrighted.
Wow.
And that just smacked us going, hang on a minute. This is a national seal, supposedly, and it's trademarked. Who trademarks a national seal? Why is it that we need to somehow use a copyright law to prevent people from the use of a so-called national symbol? And that just didn't sound right at all.
Yeah, that blew my mind in the documentary. You made a big point of that, and I love the animations as well. You keep it light and funny and interesting with the the animations that go back and forth and kind of have the real world dialogue, which ends up in a face palm like you're kidding me, right? And so it makes the documentary interesting, and through there it it mentioned a few things like that are just relevant, like why would the government patent their coat of arms or their seal? I mean, it just makes no sense. It reeks of corporation. Everything that you uncovered just reeks of corporate interest.
Yeah, I mean, could you imagine? I decided to set up a company over in Australia here, and I called it the United States of America, and I decided to use the American flag as my logo. And I popped along to the trademark office here in Australia and said, well, I want to register that as a trademark for my company here. I'd get laughed out of the building. They'd go, sorry, mate, that's national symbol and very important meaning over in America. And yet we've got people over here saying, I think it's a really good idea that they copyright the national symbol like that. Just it doesn't add up.
Exactly.
And again, when you put this question to those claiming government status, no answer. And that probably is the most telling thing again. You can ask the armchair experts and they might have an answer, but those actually in the government, supposedly government, the likes of the Governor, the Governor-General, the Prime Minister, the Attorney General, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, none of them could seemingly answer. Now, am I asking the wrong people? Should I ask the janitor? Or I've asked everyone seemingly at the top of the pile. There's got to be about 50 or so ministers in various departments that we've asked now, including judges, magistrates, all sorts, and not one of them has been able to even attempt an answer.
Yeah, that pretty much nails it. There were some similarities in the documentary that comes to mind here in America was Aaron Russo's film. It's called Freedom to Fascism. It was all about the IRS. Rumors are they might have even killed him over this. Aaron Russo is no longer with us. He died shortly after this documentary, but it was very powerful, and it was in an expose into the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, which collects, taxes on behalf of the Treasury, we're told, right? So it can pay for things that are important. Well, we find out really it goes off to pay the debt that's created off of every single dollar bill. It's a pretty simple concept. They create money from nothing with the Fed. They use the IRS to collect those taxes from the people, and you find out it's everything like you've mentioned here. They're tricking you with verbiage and language, and they're falsely representing the government. And even when they're questioned, some of these agents actually in the documentary, one of them even turned and ended up flipping over to the other side and was featured in the documentary. Aaron Russo stumbled over her early on, and she realized, yeah, after this issue kept coming up more often about proving the authenticity of the IRS and the legality of this law of taxing profits, not wages. And so everyone knows that you pay taxes even on your wages, but the way the law is written very specifically, it shouldn't be. It should be taxing only profits and not wages. And so that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back for that IRS agent that ended up flipping the script and representing the other side, now representing suing the IRS for false, charges and false payment requests. That is pretty much sounds a lot like what you had to deal with your Corvette situation.
Yep. And it's ironic that I have received a call from someone who worked at the Australian Taxation Office who watched my documentary and asked rather similar questions of the Australian Taxation Office. Where's the money going? And absolutely stonewalled with those sorts of questions. So funny that you mentioned that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that the reason you're probably not getting an answer is it's so compartmentalized. They don't even know. They're just doing their job. They can't answer that question, so they ignore it or they avoid it. Chances are the people that you're asking at this point don't even have that knowledge. They are not even allowed to know, and it's probably a totally blindsided question because the individuals who are behind this, I believe, are very cunning. They're very wise, and they have planned this out over many years, and it's no accident that things are the way they are. And so as we kind of begin to unravel and pull at these threads, it just leads to more frequently unanswered questions, which is so eloquently put by the documentary, because that's what you get. The deeper you go down the rabbit hole, it just seems to be more unanswered questions that they just won't even address. And so today, even they're sitting on your Corvette. What's the latest with the status on the Corvette, other than you've billed them? You haven't heard from them in any other respect?
No. Basically, haven't received one scrap of correspondence since January this year.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. That's a long time. I feel bad for you. Man, that is just horrible. And they do it because they can. They know that they can, and whoever's at that level of the food chain on the other end of this dialogue you're having is just saying, oh, well, we'll just keep it here wherever it is on location, and he'll just continue to send us invoices, and we'll just ignore it. Do you know where that location is? Do you at least know where it is sitting in a lot somewhere? Or?
Yes. Yeah, no, I know where it is. And perhaps the most encouraging thing is the response of a lot of the people who've seen the documentary have been writing in. And I believe that's only a fraction of those who are doing it as well. And they actually have been encouraged to ask questions of so-called government that they're involved in, whether it be customs or various other departments. And they're actually starting to go, well, you know what? I've had enough of this being treated like dirt. I'm going to actually start asking for some questions of the validity as well. And whilst I'd say a lot of the people that are being asked these questions don't know, like you just said, I'd use the analogy of if you walked into, say, Walmart in the States or the equivalent of Coles or supermarkets in Australia, and you ask the the girl behind the counter at the checkout, look, I tell you what, I'd like to buy the entire company of Walmart or Coles or whatever. The girl would say, well, hang on a minute, I'll get my manager. And the manager would probably come out and say, well, hang on, we need to talk to the state manager. State manager says, no, you actually need the national manager. National manager probably says, well, we've got to take this to the board.
Yep.
So I argue that somewhere if we are really dealing with government, that they would ultimately be able to find someone in their organisation to answer that question. And that's where I turn back to one of those, that speech by John F. Kennedy that I was just looking at a YouTube clip of. And the quote that comes out of that is, he says, government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security.
Absolutely nailed it. I couldn't agree more, Scott. As I had the same speech I think I shared with my listeners on November 22nd in tribute to Mr. JFK. Stay tuned with us. Scott Bartle, frequently unanswered questions of the Australian government, Decrypted Matrix. We will be right back. All right, we're back. Scott Bartle tonight. Frequently unanswered questions of the Australian government. It started with a Corvette. Just a little old Corvette. Scott wanted to bring it over to Australia. Custom Corvette, a very beautiful blue Corvette, I might add. It's stuck. It's stuck in customs right now because some stupid corporations are trying to front as an illegitimate government entity. But Scott said, oh, no. Oh, no. I don't think so. I'm not going to pay your overpriced bill, possibly unnecessary bill, until you prove your legitimacy. Are you the Parliament, Commonwealth of Australia, or are you just the Commonwealth of Australia representing itself as a corporate entity licensed in Washington, D.C. under the Securities and Exchange Commission? This puzzle, this labyrinth, led Scott on an interesting journey, which has now culminated in a documentary, a website, the documentary Frequently Unanswered Questions of the Australian Government, FUQ for short. You can find that with a quick Google search. The website, truth-now.net, a plethora of information here. I was kind of cruising the sitemap. A few other pages here. You got some action, Scott. You've got some points of action. What can you do? Emailing public servants, sign a petition for Her Majesty, download and mail documents to public servants. I love that one. And of course, you can always make a donation to keep up and help with the research, which is free for none of us. I might add, most of us are paying to bring this information to you and make it possible. But hey, it's worth it. It's all in the pursuit of justice and empowerment for humanity. So tell us, Scott, a little bit about this petition. Did you start this, or how did this get going?
Yeah, it came out of the back of an article that was run by the guys at Wake Up World. They run a website that pumps out various articles very similar to the Decrypted Matrix. And essentially we wanted to boil it down to one simple question, and that's ended up what we called this petition. And it appears to trace back to this one simple question regarding or surrounding the letters patent that constitute the Office of Governor-General here in the Commonwealth of Australia. And that, to me, is the absolute fundamental before we even get on to talking about why we've got this company registered in Washington, D.C. called the Commonwealth of Australia. Because before we even get to that, we need to know the legitimacy of this Australian government. of the Commonwealth as in the Constitution. And for all of that to happen, you go back to the Governor-General. So the Governor-General's position rests upon the office of the Governor-General. And that office of the Governor-General rests upon these letters patent issued by the monarch out of the UK. Now, in 1984, we had proposed or supposed to be legitimate. And what it appears to be is that they've been issued under the Great Seal of Australia, this trademarked logo of the kangaroo and the emu. And my question is essentially, is the letters patent that were issued in 1900 constituting the office of Governor-General in the Commonwealth of Australia revoked, altered or amended by an heir and successor to the late Queen Victoria in full accordance of the power and authority reserved by the late Queen Victoria in her letters patent of 1900? Was that done? Yes or no? Can we see the evidence? I'm not just looking for, oh yeah, what do you mean? Of course it's done. Yeah, no problem. Who out there in government is going to put their name on the block, almost as if we're giving a court testimony to say, yes, this is what happened? Now, I think ultimately that answer has got to come from the UK, because Australia really had nothing to do, or should have had nothing to do with such a document, in as much as it is supposed to come from the monarch. So it boils down to that one simple question surrounding the validity of the office of the Governor-General, and so much rests on that. And that's what we've boiled that petition down to.
That's awesome. That is absolutely awesome. Let's get back down to the common denominator here, which is where, as far as we can take this down to start and really understand where things diverted, vastly diverted from what from what should be the case here. And it's again, it links back to the very simple question that they figured out with the IRS. And it's the same. It's so funny you said that nobody wants to step up and admit this piece of information, because it's the same thing with the 1040. The 1040 is the tax form here in the United States of America, and there is no law on the books that clearly and plainly states that you are required by law to submit a 1040. And that is the question that they kept asking the IRS agents over and over, is where is this law? Show me the law that says I am required to submit a 1040. Where is this law? And you get that runaround. Oh, yeah, it's good. Yeah, you're good. It's in there somewhere. You got to do it. Everybody knows. Obviously, Scott, you have to do it because everybody knows that this is just what you do. How dare you ask a question or question us? And that's why I found your animation so funny, because that's how they act. They think that they're just above the law, and they can just say, oh, well, of course it's the law. Everybody knows that this is how it is. Out there that do care.
Yeah, that's one of the parallels maybe with Australia and the US in the process that I've been employing. Is like you said, that law that says I have to pay XYZ tax, and formalising through an administrative process if that evidence is not able to be provided. Well, in the absence of that existing, then quite clearly that I'm not liable for any sort of payment, and until you can invalidate that notice of default that I've just generated to demonstrate that, then I'm not paying. And that's essentially the process that I put together on the website. Unfortunately, here in Australia, it appears that we don't have, again, tracing back to the Governor-General, any legitimate courts in the country, which is kind of interesting in as much as a lot of these government departments all want you to elect to have the matter heard by a court. So they're all inviting you to take them to court, and yet I can't see any evidence, having asked how many courts in the country, for evidence of their constitutional validity. Any reason that I should actually go and visit their boardroom?
Right. Their boardroom. Exactly. It's not a courthouse. It's a
Well, if I
boardroom. Let's
can't,
be honest.
if we can't find any evidence that it's a court, it's most befitting a boardroom. It's got nice timber polished
Right?
furniture in there, and it looks really fancy, and there's a bit of leather. Looks like a boardroom. So until we get the evidence that it's a court, and we're not really asking for too much. We're not going reinvent the wheel. All we're saying is, could you show me this document here was legitimately brought into existence? And something so simple, you'd think even the lowest clerk in the court would be able to go, well, yes, here's what our authority is reliant upon, and the person who gave that the royal assent, we've been in contact with him, and we actually have a copy now of his certificate of commission, and here's the evidence that you've looked for. And no, absolutely nothing, absolute silence. And it's interesting that the longer this goes on, the more telling it really is as to the nature of the situation.
Yeah, and it must have been refreshing the little gems that you got that you found with, say, in regards to the comment that you found of I forget who it was in your parliament or in your government somewhere, who made a specific yet somewhat elusive reference to you need to challenge them. They might not be real company. They might not be real governments. It made you like pause and say, whoa, 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 whoa. So you're admitting there are fake entities that are acting like governments then? That's what you're saying then in that statement? That must have been hilarious to
Quote that was that pretend laws exist essentially. Now, regardless of the context of that quote, and it came from the Chief Justice of the High Court of Australia in 1942. Now, regardless of the validity of that or the context in which it was said, it still holds true. A pretend law is a pretend law, and no one in the country should be entitled to abide by it. So I believe that we should be able to ask for the validity of these laws, else we're in a dictatorship. Would you agree with that?
Yeah,
If
absolutely.
we can't even challenge and say, look, could you show me your badge? Can you show me that got proper royal assent? We are in an environment which is without challenge, which is unanswerable to the people. And that, to me, is dictatorship.
Yep, it's a scary thing. It's happening everywhere. It's happening to the internet. It's happening to the police force. I mean, I was reporting on that a couple months ago, how this lack of empathy within the police force, and now they're allowed at protests to cover their badges. They're being photographed now and being seen under camera, probably because of that. They know they're on camera and they'll be scrutinized, and they're being allowed to put Velcro over their name badges, so they can't even be identified and now held accountable in these protests and beatdowns.
Yeah. And the parallels I see with that in Australia is a lot of notices that are being written from various so-called government departments are coming out unsigned or signed in a manner where you can't decipher the personal identity of the author. Even the lawyers and the debt collectors are writing to you, signed XYZ company. Like, well, hang on a minute. Who's actually willing to say, I represent this company and I write to you with a valid concern and I can defend my position and have the confidence to put my own name on that document? I mean, when we're not even seeing people who've got the confidence to put their own name on a document, as you said, covering their badges, who's hiding from who?
Right. What it shows me is that that's how desperate, Scott. That's how desperate these faceless men and women, control groups sitting behind these privatized corporations that are that scared of their people to not let them have the truth, to not let them know how this is, how this is all gone down. I mean, George Bush Sr. was quoted, one of our former presidents was quoted as saying, if they behind closed doors, of course, he said, if the public ever found out what we've done, they would chase us down the street and lynch us. I mean, he's admitted these guys know what they're doing. They know that how this has all been very strategically orchestrated. And we're not supposed to ask questions, Scott. We're not supposed to be uncovering this. You weren't supposed to notice that the seal change and these corporate logos and then this link to the SEC. So I feel very fortunate to have you on the show show tonight. It was an awesome show. We've only got a couple minutes left. I wanted to give a quick shout out because I didn't even know about this, about you and this documentary until I saw it on Wake Up World. So shout out to Wake Up World. They're definitely an inspiration for Decrypted Matrix. They are and have been on for a while on my Respected Peers page. So all the listeners, check out wakeupworld.com as well. Definitely what I consider a peer in the alternative news space. They are always coming up with good stuff, good information, expanding the mind, keeping brain food coming in, and it's stuff that you just typically won't find in the mainstream news. And the information that you've uncovered, Scott, I want to continue sharing this information. We'd love to have you back on the show the next time we can, and I'm sure there's more that you'll continue to uncover. Hopefully, don't give up in your journey and your pursuit for further information. Remember that we can take action, we can question these knuckleheads, we can keep them accountable. Scott has done a great job of that and making his presence known with the corporate entities that are masquerading here as government. So check it out. Frequently unanswered questions of the Australian government. It is up on decryptedmatrix.com right now. His website, truth-now.net. You can watch the trailer. You can watch the full documentary there. He's got awesome breakdowns and diagrams and action material and support articles and just vital questions and ways to really dig into this yourself and hopefully contribute some way that you can. Scott and I can only do so much with this kind of stuff and bringing information to you. So, Scott, any final words for the listeners? While we got you for another couple seconds.
Thanks, Max. Yeah, I think it's the toolkit that I'm working on, and managing your own state and confidence levels to be able to pose these questions to find that lawful validity of who we're really dealing with.
Excellent. Wise words. Never back down. Make these guys be accountable. Scott, good luck with the Corvette. We hope you get it, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks, buddy.
Cheers, Max.